Vini Causer, or Come Chat in French Creole, is the organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission's Public Education Forum Series on regional integration. The Vini Causer Forum Series, which I have the honor of hosting and moderating, provides an opportunity for grassroots representatives, key decision makers, observers and experts within their field to come and discuss and debate in front of a live audience the development opportunities and challenges facing the region. This is a platform and a conduit for collective citizens' voice to help shape national and regional policies. We've come to South Hill, Anguilla, an OECS associate member state, to explore the key question: how are we tracking as a region with youth empowerment and development? It is a subject which international organizations such as the ILO, the CDB, the World Bank, and many others have monitored and reported on for decades. So what is different about the discussion on this OECS Vini Causer platform? The diverse panel, ranging from government to grassroots representatives, start the discussion right now.
Vini Causer. Come talk, come chat, come listen. Vini Causer. Let's talk integration, one OECS region. Antigua, Vini Causer, Anguilla, Vini Causer, BVI, Dominica, Vini Causer. Hey, Grenada, Vini Causer, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Montserrat, Martinique, Vini Causer.
I wanted to, as an introduction to today's discussion, give our panelists an opportunity to tell us from their perspective why the subject of youth empowerment and development is a salient issue now. I would like to offer Mr. Romney the opportunity to begin.
Thank you, Anil, and also welcome to Anguilla. Youth account for about 60% of the world's global population. In Anguilla, for example, depending on what definition of youth you're using, it can go up as high as 70%. Young people, as the saying usually repeated, are the future. The reality of that statement is that young people aren't here, they're now. Right. Young people are currently with us. They're not going to arrive 10 years later. So we have to address the concerns of young people now. We have to plan carefully to ensure that they are developed into adults that are responsible, that are socially conscious, that are effective in their dealings, that are engaged in a sustainable way, both in a civic manner and also economically. So I cannot think of another segment of the population that we need to give due attention to in the manner that we do to young people. So it's urgent.
Thank you, Mr. Romney. Mr. Ellis, why now?
Thank you very much. I want to preface my comments by saying thank you very much for the invitation. And I bring everybody greetings from the President and management and staff of the Caribbean Development Bank, which is based in Barbados. Why now? Very important question. And moderator, as you said earlier, it is not new. Young people in this time are facing tremendous challenges, but there are also significant opportunities. They're in a time of technological change and advancement. Young people are learning in different ways. They're using the technology to be able to get ahead. But what is happening, we are talking a lot about innovation. We're talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about advancement. But young people are living in a world which has been set up by adults who have a particular perspective. And when young people want to engage in certain ways using the technology for their own advancement, sometimes they stumble into roadblocks. This is something that we have to address.
And that is why it's urgent to have this conversation now. Ms. Hodge, it's talking about your demographic. Why do you think this conversation is necessary now and more urgent than ever before?
I think I'd answer the question with a question, why not now?
Okay.
And if not now, when? Because like Mr. Romney rightly said, a lot of persons say that young people are the future. The truth is, young people are now. We're not. The future, we are now. And I think in terms of why it's so important, it's because the technology and the innovation and the energy that is usually found within this demographic of young people.
It needs to be harnessed now.
Correct.
Mrs. McMaster, do you agree?
Well, as a parent, I'm very concerned about the youth. And I think what is happening right now, if we don't really culture them to have values particularly, feelings of independence, feel that they can go out there and do what others have done in the work of business and creating opportunity for themselves, because the workforce sometimes is getting so closed off right now. We have to ensure that there's going to be something for youth to do. Too much of our youth are being led astray.
I believe that youth are basically the greatest national asset that any country can have, rather than gold and oil, which most people think. In this period of globalization and all of these recent technological advances, what you find is that most young people are left to their own devices. Many of them would take the right path, but there are quite a few, there's a large percentage that would use those very same things to go the other way, and they really need some sort of guidance as to how they go about graduating from being a youth to being an adult.
Thank you so much. Data on global unemployment provided by the World Bank indicates that 1/3 of the world's 1.8 billion young people aged 15 to 24 are neither employed, educated, nor trained. The Caribbean region is not exempt from this crisis. Mr. Ellis, as a social analyst, how is this manifested in our communities within the Caribbean and within the OECS region?
What we've seen is that a number of young people are disengaged from society because of alternative perspectives in terms of their own development. A number of young people want opportunities but are excluded for whatever reason. A very important element of this too looks at the whole aspect of youth unemployment. A line to that is the fact that a number of young people live in households which are headed by single women. But there are a range of issues that confront the society and young people, and in order for them to find their way and to find the space, it is a very challenging situation.
I think we find ourselves in society right now using a model of youth engagement that was developed in the 60s and 40s, 50s and 60s. And it's no longer fit for purpose. And we have to make that transition very quickly. We talk a lot about the technological age that we are in and so forth. But if we fail to make that transition, we will lose a generation of young people. Now, it's that disengagement that fuels a lot of the perception with regards to young people being seen as liabilities. We focus on the negative aspects. We focus on a small, minute group of young persons that, unfortunately, in some cases, no fault of their own, get into difficult situations. And we miss the broader picture that the 95 or 99% are doing everything we expect them to do, right? And that compounds the problem on both ends of the equation.
What does it take, Ms. Hodge, to get you engaged? What approach would you like to see?
I think given the times, you have to use the technology. And if you don't keep up and you aren't engaging in what they're engaging in, you miss out. You miss that connection. And so you must have some link to young people, and that link is the technology that they use.
Is there a clash, Mrs. McMaster? Do you think there's a clash, a culture clash?
There is a culture clash, and we from the old school trying to catch up with them. You know, with the technology, as you're hearing there, you know, it's sort of put you in a different, but I think love and encouragement and good examples are what we have to use to get the youth to really feel, listen, I have to value myself, I have to look to my future, and I want to be something good and somebody that somebody can talk about years after I'm gone.
So So, Mrs. McMaster, you're saying the root cause in the breakdown and the disconnect lies within the value, the change in value system?
I think so. And it's the young people now, they are attracted to so much different things. We as in the older, not you, I mean, you can have all these new things, new technology, but I'm just trying to fight to learn some of it.
I want to turn our focus here to Miss Jasmine Ruan. Yes. Do you feel that the youths are sufficiently engaged?
Youth have a lot of new ideas, a lot of creativity, and their involvement with an older generation is a little bit pushed back, I would say, because they have such different ideas, as older generations aren't as informed. And I feel as though the youth's connection with them is a little bit pushed back because they're not able to speak on the same grounds. They have different social ideas, they have different political ideas because they've been exposed to a greater thing that the other generation have not been exposed to.
Okay, thank you for your contribution. Mr. Ellis, what is the official position on the gap between the young people of today and the systems within which they live?
There are a number of reasons why. Emil Durkheim, who was we call a structural functionalist, he predicated his theorizing on the importance of social systems within the society, the role of the church, the role of the school, the role of the home, etc. But he also made the point that what is seen as deviant today is normal tomorrow.
Yes.
And I remember when I was growing up, my parents would tell me that when they wore bell-bottom pants and when they had afros and so on, it caused the same outcry in society as the things that young people are doing now. So you always find that there's a generational gap. So as a sociologist, I take the view that change is imminent, and we have to find a way to manage that change in an orderly way. You know, it's about giving people an opportunity to express themselves. We talk about social improvement, we talk about inclusive growth and development. So we have to find that space.
I'd like to give this opportunity to anyone in the audience who have a point or a question regarding youth engagement, deeper youth engagement.
We tend to always put it on the adults for them to almost meet us halfway. But what can the youth do to now bridge that gap so that, they can, so that they can connect and meet at the same halfway? You understand what I mean? Because we tend to say, oh, older people, they don't try to get into technology. How about you help them to get to that level so that we all can then bridge it together?
Thank you for that contribution.
I totally agree with her. It's like when I was young, families did everything together, parents and kids. Now it's different. It's not necessarily because they don't want to, but because things have changed. You have single mothers now, people who go to work in the morning and don't see their kids all day. They're left with a babysitter and they come home at night. So you find that gradually that space has grown in between the younger generation and the older generation. But there are things that I think could be put in place that can bring both groups together and that could perhaps mend some of the problems and the crises that we're seeing within those groups.
Mr. Ellis, it's back to you. We know that in the region and in some OECS states, youth unemployment is as high as 40%. What are you seeing from your stats about youth unemployment in the OECS, and how can we address that growing crisis?
It's a very good question. Youth unemployment is a particular problem. It's a problem globally, and it's a problem in the sub-region and the wider region. We also see disparity between employment between males and female adults and male and female youth. Another challenge that we have to talk about is labor market segmentation, where there's a perception within some countries that there's some jobs which are male jobs and some jobs which are female jobs. And you find that those jobs which are defined as male jobs invariably get a higher wage or attract a higher salary. What should happen within the system, particularly within the school system, is that you create a space for all persons to be able to learn what they want. What we're seeing in Barbados, for example, is that jobs that were dominated by men, women are now taking on those roles.
Okay.
We have a lot of women who are painters. We have women driving bobcats and backhoes. We have women going in areas which were non-traditional. One of the reasons for that is that because they've had children where men abdicated their responsibility, they had to find themselves in the labor market to earn.
Okay.
Right? So this is something that we have to bear in mind. And with society changing, that whole idea of jobs for men and jobs for women has to go by the wayside. People have to be given the opportunities to be able to participate and to earn in a way that does not discriminate against them.
And the Anguillan approach is not particularly different from the approach that is being used throughout the OECS. From a policy perspective, we have to ensure we create an enabling environment that effectively transition young people from secondary education into full-time or sustainable livelihoods or full-time employment. We've done a number of things in Anguilla concurrently, and it's no one program or no one initiative can capture or provide the relief that they need. And I do agree that we've seen something significant following the global financial crisis. It's not just that businesses closed and existing businesses are cautious. Existing businesses are pushing a philosophy that we can do more with less staff. And you're right, they're not necessarily transitioning to technology. And I see that in Anguilla every day with layoffs in the hotel sector, right? They feel they're making calculations that suggest I might save by paying one employee over time rather than hiring another employee to do the additional hours.
Okay. Mr. Durand?
The OECS Commission is acutely aware of the youth unemployment situation in the sub-region, and the OECS Commission has developed a regional education sector strategy, of which technical and vocational education and training is a pillar on this. The sub-region has made great strides in providing wider access to education for all of its citizens. So we have universal primary education, and in several states, there is universal access to secondary education. The trouble with that is we are arriving at a point where our ability to deliver education and training is catching up with our ability to absorb the graduates of the training program into the workforce. In other words, the jobs are limited. It is becoming more competitive to get into the labor market. And therefore, we now have to roll back and rethink the quality of education that we deliver. The CARICOM Regional Strategy for Workforce Development specifies that there has to be extensive consultation with the private sector in identifying on an ongoing basis the key areas that are required for training in order to ensure that we train people directly for the workforce.
But what we are doing in Anguilla is this. We are tackling it from a three-front approach. We are looking at young persons who are vulnerable, who find it particularly difficult because of certain socioeconomical problems to find full-time employment. We craft a program that is now in its 9th year and exceptionally successful. In 2014, it transitioned 78% of young people into full-time employment. In 2015, that number grew to 83.3%. In 2016, it came back down to 56%. What is this program? It's called Job Link Up. But the program has many components. We focus on young people who have physical disabilities or who are the victims of crime and so forth and have resulting disabilities as a result. We try to get them, provide them with an array of services to transition them into full-time employment.
When you say provide them with an array of services, you mean you're building capacity within them?
Within them.
Skill sets?
Yes. The other area is national service. We've encouraged unemployed young people through a program called Youth Exposure to volunteer while they're unemployed and while they're seeking work.
But they still have to feed households. So how do they then achieve that? How do they meet those very real needs?
We provide them with a stipend while they're on the program. For Job Link Up, the government of Anguilla provided 50% of the stipend, and the business that is working with a young person provide the other 50%. That stipend is small. It's 1,000 EC. For those who are doing the national service program, the youth exposure program, who are going to businesses and companies as volunteers, The government provides the full 100%, and that's 1,000 EC.
Okay.
All right. What we've also done as well, because we recognize the creativity, the ingenuity, and the drive of our young people, we have also created a youth entrepreneurial program.
Yes.
It's a complete package program that addresses all or removes all barriers that young people face in starting their own businesses or being self-employed.
Mr. Reynolds, just to give context, tell us briefly what your demographic looks like, and to what extent is the community employed or unemployed? Are
Okay.
they mostly unemployed or
Yeah,
you know?
Wilton's Yard is basically between 26 to 30 households and maybe between 50 to 60 people. Of that group, probably about less than 25% are employed.
Are employed?
Are employed, less than 25%. And with the youth themselves, even less than that, simply because of the, not just the stigma that is attached. And there is stigma. If you say that on your job application that you come from Wilton's Yard, you probably won't get a job. Basically, it's lack of jobs as well. People are looking for the best in their fields. So what you find is everybody's striving to be the best, and they always go for the top. They always go for the cream. And that also starts from the education system, from in school, which is very, very, very bad. It's not the way to go. Yes,
So
25
you have
or less.
75%, upwards of 75% unemployment, and within the youth demographic, it's even higher.
Yes.
How are they living?
Well, as you may well imagine, but they get by. And one of the things with living in quote-unquote ghettos is look out for one another, because the houses are right next to one another. If you don't have something, you could always get it from a neighbor. And, you know, there's a lot of borrowing, there's a lot of lending, you know, and every now and then you may get some organization who would probably come in, chip in. So, yeah, we manage.
Yeah.
We manage. It's not easy, but we manage. You'd be amazed.
If I were to ask a follow-up on that, being able to manage, you qualified your area as
Right.
quote-unquote ghettos.
Right,
And a lot of people see the ghetto as part of the problem
right.
that exacerbate the causes and the end result of unemployment. To what extent do you, think that is a fair or unfair categorization?
Well, I think it would be unfair, simply because if we have to look at it like that, then our governments would be at fault, wouldn't they? Because there are dozens of such ghettos regionally in all islands. So if that was a fact, why wouldn't they do something about it? The fact remains that it exists. This is something that exists, and it's something that governments know about. They're aware of it. And I don't know, every time budget time comes around, it seems to get swept under the table because, there's always something else that's more important.
My feeling is that the private sector has to make some real serious investment in the people who are looking for jobs. I think the private sector should engage themselves more in that area. I'm committed. And provide some financing for that also, so that more of these people can be trained. We can't expect the government alone to do it. We got to invest in them and encourage them to become entrepreneurs. They can do things themselves, have their own businesses, join together as a group, and work together. Unity is strength.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone in the audience interested in offering a perspective on their unemployment challenge? Are you currently unemployed?
No, I am employed.
Okay.
But my question, concerns, or comments stem from a lot of the conversation that happened prior. And in order to stay on point, I would just look to make sure that I'm mentioning what I wanted to say. I think a fundamental problem that we've had over the years is our education system. And it has resulted in what we see today. Back in my time, if you weren't doing CXCs, and for those who are older, if you weren't doing GCEs or whatever it is, it was frowned upon. TVET and vocational training and all those things, and still to a large extent today are seen as a sentence for young people. when they misbehave in the classroom because we are not equipped to diagnose learning disabilities, and we have other challenges that we can't face, we sentence them to Campus C here in Anguilla, Campus D, and they're in a daycare. There's no positive reinforcement, if we're going to be honest, and then we get these ghettos and these societal problems that we have now. They don't have anything to put on their resume. We talk about the creme de la creme, but still we need garbage collectors, still we need carpenters, still we need, in our hotel industry, we still need gardeners and all that type of stuff.
What we found is that there's a mindset within a number of countries that don't value or don't see the real value of technical vocational education and training. CDB is moving in a direction where we are bringing that to the fore and trying to instill in countries that there are multiple pathways to success. We've come out sociologically out of a circumstance where academic subjects were the ones that were privileged. But we recognize that we have to create a space for that technical and vocational education and so on.
We're functioning in an era right now where there are people functioning in jobs where there's not even a name for it as yet.
Yes.
That is how dynamic the job market, that is how dynamic the private sector is right now. And where we are failing our young people is that in the education system, in many instances where the failure is, does not lie with the individual.
Yeah.
It actually lies with the institution because we didn't recognize early enough that this young person is an engineer. Their mind functions in an engineering fashion, and therefore we should develop them as an engineer.
I would say I would like to know what are we doing in terms of, yes, it is good to always say you're going to develop us, we give us TVET, we have all the education, but yet still, the older generation does not want to let go. If you are not letting go, then we won't be able to go into these different places. You're saying that there is unemployment, there is no jobs, but when you reach a retirement age, yet still you're bringing back those that have retired to come back and teach. If you're not saying, okay, let that teacher, we'll say, okay, he's good at his job. Let him shadow someone else and teach that person, and then when he goes out, then the next person can come up. That's my point.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Mr. Romney, to what extent public and private sector are guilty of what the young lady articulated?
Yes. Is the system guilty of not planning ahead adequately? Yes.
Okay.
I taught for 25 years. Yes, we are. But in a lot of cases, though, decisions to extend someone's is not an extension of their retirement. It's just to bring them back to fill a gap. Those decisions are made after the post is made available to the public in an open process where they can apply. It's not an immediate thing. You close, a person retires and then we just extend. I can give you an example. Just in Anguilla recently, and this is someone who works in my office. The TVET coordinator was coming towards retirement, and she's retired now. The post was advertised multiple times, but the successful applicant needs to be sent off to train. And
you couldn't find a young person for that opportunity?
for the post requires a master's level training and certain skills in TVET.
One of the things, Mr. Romney, that the young people are complaining about, and we hear it as we canvass ideas and so on the ground, is that one of the excuses being used to prevent new blood, an injection of new blood, is that the young applicants are coming without experience. The young people are saying, how do we get the experience if you don't give us the opportunity?
But let's go back to, I'm in a very difficult position here, you know.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
I'm the youth director and I champion these issues.
Yes.
But I have to be fair as well because I'm also a senior officer in government, so I have to be fair.
And while you collect your thoughts, Mr. Romney, I must agree, and I think one of the problems that we suffer with here is a lack of succession planning. If you know that you have older persons who are nearing retirement in certain positions, then it should be incumbent on the policymakers to ensure that we have young persons trained in those positions, and not that we wait until they reach retirement age and then you say, well, there's no one there to fill the post. That is the problem that I think young people feel when it comes to that. On the other hand, and on the flip side, I was waiting for an opportunity to speak about the employment. When you have high numbers and a greater population of, the greater percentage of the population being young persons, I think one of the things that we are also facing in Anguilla is that, at least within the public service, you're going to find a lot of young persons occupying the jobs. And so when you have persons coming out of school, these positions are already filled by younger persons, and they're not moving out. You have a number of young PSs, a number of young department heads. And so upward mobility is limited and is static because you have a greater youth population.
Okay, so sorry, Mr. Romney responds?
Let me just respond. Again, I'm not making excuses here. There is succession planning in the public sector in Angola, and I'm going to reference the very same example. There were two persons identified for that post who had training, but the interest was not there. Okay? I want to challenge young people. Before we have a response, we owe it to ourselves to also understand what is happening. Okay? Yes. When jobs in Angola are advertised, young persons, for the most part, assume that they're person earmarked for the jobs, and they don't apply.
It's a culture problem.
It's a cultural problem.
In the traditional sectors, I think there were some statistics that we reviewed that showed, and in fact, right here in Anguilla, some of the traditional sectors are failing, or transitioning, or basically transitioning out the old guard and are now hiring new talent for cheaper that are more effective in what they do for a lesser cost. And apparently young people are benefiting from that kind of movement. But Mr. Ellis, the succession plan that Ms. Hodge spoke about, to what extent that is happening in both private and public sector or not happening?
This question always comes up. And we have to be very clear in our minds. And I do agree that succession planning is very important, because in the event that you don't do it properly, then you lead to a lot of frustration and anger within the workforce.
Is it more prevalent in the public sector, though, as opposed to private sector, the lack of succession planning?
I can't speak very much about the public sector, but what I can say is that when an employee joins an organization, HR management knows that person's age. They know the person has X amount of time. If they work the full years up to employment, they know the length of time that person will stay in the organization. It is therefore incumbent upon management, if you're planning properly, to have a plan in place for succession when that person retires. It leaves a lot of frustration in the company when persons retire and are brought back under the guise that you don't have talented persons to fill that position.
When there's so much youth unemployment.
Yes.
Yes.
But I want to introduce something here that hasn't been mentioned yet, is the whole concept of underemployment.
Yes.
We talked about unemployment, we talked about skills and so on, but our country poverty assessments that we've supported countries in doing since 1995 constantly highlight the issue of underemployment. There are a number of persons within our societies who have skills, who are well qualified, but cannot find a job commensurate with their skills and experience. Right? And what you find, what that leads to is sometimes persons have to work 2 or 3 jobs to get the level of income to be able to sustain themselves and their family and to have some disposable income. Because let's face it, if you're talking about poverty reduction, you need to be in a circumstance where you can earn, where you can have disposable income. After you've paid your bills, etc., you need to have something to put aside for a rainy day. to be able to invest, to be able to educate your children, etc. In the event that you're not doing that, you're increasing your risk and vulnerability to poverty. So it is very important to take these things into account. And underemployment leads to a source of frustration. It actually leads some people into the alternative economy, because people say, what is the point of studying? What is the point of having skills when I can't get a job and participate in the economy in the way in which I should? So those are some very dynamic situations that are at work.
Yes, thank you so much. We have a response from one of our contributing panelists.
In this generation, people are pushed to do well academically, where you get 10, 12, 15 subjects, and you spend your entire time in your books, because that's what people are pressuring you to do. I feel as though we need to develop a system where people can learn the social skills in order to get a job, where they can learn how to interact with persons. Whereas you're not just a person who's in your books all the time, that you know how to interact with somebody, you know how to network, you know how to meet people, which are gonna get you somewhere.
I'd like to transition into a pre-filmed video clip of a young lady in Grenada whose primary focus is mentoring and training entrepreneurs.
My name is Lisa Lewis, and I am the founder of Dynamic Youth of Grenada Business Hub. We started it back in 2012, formally registered in 2014. We are approved implementing partner of Center of Excellence for Sustainable Livelihoods in Barbados.
So my organization is in charge of helping youths to start up their own businesses through mentorship and training. Dynamic Youth is really an organization that is geared towards establishing that entrepreneurial mindsets in our youths. I mean, you could have a job, yes, but there must be something on the side that you can make extra cash with. My partner and I, we started Winner's Egg Farm 4 years ago, and at the moment we have 200 layers, and we supply small shops and householders. We supply to even some young people who just need to make an extra $1. We sell eggs, one tray of egg for $18 to them, and they can make maybe $30 on that tray of egg. Entrepreneurs come to us for assistance. Maybe they need some help writing a business plan or so, or maybe they need some help doing their books. In Grenada, we need an organization that not only could mentor and train, but we also need a lot of funding. Because there's young people out there with big business ideas, but to get the funding, it will take a while. Young people are trying to innovate. In Grenada, we have a big waste problem. Getting rid of cardboard products and those kind of things. We don't have a place to really dispose of it properly. And cardboard could be turned into paper, toilet tissue, and those type of products. I have an entrepreneur who is interested in that. He has been waiting 1 year for funding for that from a funding agency here, and it hasn't come through yet. After you mentor and you train an entrepreneur, then sometimes they can go to the bank because they don't have the collateral to supply the bank with. So I am seeing Dynamic Youth of Grenada Business Hub helping young people with funding to start up their own business.
Featured in the video is Lisa Lewis Douglas from Dynamic Youth Business Hub in Grenada, as you would have heard. We hear a lot about entrepreneurship as a response to the unemployment situation. Mr. Romney, is it our panacea?
Yes, it can be. Entrepreneurship provides us with an opportunity to diversify our economies through innovation and creativity. And this is what we were talking about earlier when we say young people are our assets. right? If they truly are an asset, they bring a unique skill set, a unique perspective, a unique way of doing things to the table that if we harness it appropriately, we can successfully turn those ideas and that energy into sustainable businesses.
Governments are saying, okay, young people, create your own employment. Private sector is also saying, well, stop looking to us to provide the jobs. You know, you can create your own. But in our OECS communities, the sectors aren't very much diversified. I mean, it's a replication of tourism, agriculture, the service industry. So that is already saturated. Ms. Hodge, I see you nodding in approval.
In regards to entrepreneurship, I think the way that we view entrepreneurship, like you say, in the traditional sectors, young persons may want to venture into sectors that are not traditional. But when you have systems in place that don't understand where it is the young persons want to go, that creates another barrier. When I want to go and get a business license for something that no one has heard of, you don't even know what category to place me in. And I have seen that firsthand where, so you have young persons and it adds to another level of frustration. Because you're going to tell me, okay, I can be an entrepreneur, and even if by chance I have access to the funding, which in and of itself is another issue, but if I can somehow find access to the funding to go into a sector that has not yet been explored, and then I'm going to take another 3 months so that the ministry can decide, where do I place you in your business license? That is 3 months that you have put a young person or any person through frustration. And young people, one of our flaws is that advantages is that we like things instantaneous. And when you're telling me I have to wait 3 months just so you could figure out what it is I'm doing, it's a huge, huge turnoff.
So entrepreneurship is being pushed, but we know that there's a very high failure rate when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I want to say, first of all, that I don't see entrepreneurship as a panacea.
Okay.
I see it as another option for persons to be able to earn, to have income, to improve their families and their circumstances, and to have sustainable income generation. So it is an option. It's not the panacea at all. Entrepreneurship entails risk-taking. And historically, people in the Caribbean have been termed as risk-averse. I don't always agree with it, but I see where it is going. Entrepreneurship is not easy. High level of risk, high level of failure, and part of our culture in the region is that we tend not to want to give persons another opportunity. If you go into a business and you have not done well, you are written off. So if you look across our societies, entrepreneurs carry a certain spirit. There's a vibrancy, there's a stick-to-itness, they're fighters. Because sometimes you have to do business in spite of.
And not everybody possesses that.
I think it could be viable, but you need to have the enabling environment, the framework, and the support to business persons, particularly young persons, who, as one panelist said, like immediate gratification. They want things instantly. And building a business takes time.
I'm told that there's a question.
My name is Kenwell Hodge, and I go to ALHCS. I'm in my first year of sixth form. I play a lot of sports, so yes, the sports question was destined to come from me. My question is, with all the great athletes on the island, what are we doing to maximize their potential and convert them into world-class athletes?
Okay. And it's a pertinent question. And in the audience today as a contributing panelist is Nias Alfred, who has a very vibrant sports organization in St. Lucia, through which he has been able to provide a lot of exposure and mentorship to athletes. We are going to now take a look at some of Nias's work before we give him an opportunity to come to the mic.
My name is Nias Alfred, and I am from the community of Choiseul in St. Lucia. I am a youth advocate, I am a sports advocate, and I am the co-founder of sports media organization in St. Lucia known as Sport AV. Now, Sport AV was started by myself and a good friend of mine by the name of Yanoi Fevri. Basically, we started the organization because we realized that enough was not being done to showcase the talent of our athletes in St. Lucia.
I appreciate the work that Sports AVI does because they provide exposure to a lot of athletes who locally and abroad who generally would not get very much airtime and a lot of exposure. So I appreciate the work that they do and the fact that they also check on us as opposed to just checking on us as athletes. They also care about us as people, so they check in with us apart from our athletic endeavors. So
we started on the premise of giving exposure to our athletes, and over the past couple of years the organization has grown.
Because it gives us athletes of St. Lucia and the smaller Caribbean a chance to market our talents and support each other.
As an athlete, I think Sport AV is a great initiative as it presents a platform which was not there previously for athletes to showcase their talent, and it also encourages athletes to take advantages of the opportunities in sport.
Now that we have you here, live and in person, I wanted to ask you, what void, if you were to summarize the void that you think your organization is filling on the ground in St. Lucia, and as we heard in the piece, throughout the other islands within the OECS, what void do you think you're filling?
I've listened to all the panelists speak. We've talked about issues in terms of crime. We spoke about, I love the issue that Jasmine raised about the fact that we don't teach life skills. We've heard about employment, entrepreneurship. And for me, one thing that can help in some way in addressing most of these problems is sports. In sports from an early age, we get to develop a lot of the key attributes that we would need in a workplace. We get to learn about teamwork, about collaboration, about helping each other, about the various social skills that you would need on a field. One of the things that is really dear to me and dear to my organization as well is the issue of sports being used in order to further education, right? Over the past weekend, I was at this college showcase, which was organized by the Free Kick Foundation in St. Lucia, based out of the US, but operates in St. Lucia, where they try to get US coaches down to St. Lucia to scout athletes, to try to get them scholarships to further their education. And one of the things that one of the coaches told me when I interviewed him was that over the past 5 years, he's from the University of South Carolina, head coach. Over the past 5 years, he's had one athlete from the Caribbean. What that said to me is that we don't take enough advantage of the opportunities which exist in sports.
Thank you so much. We discussed solutions, the problems to youth unemployment. And one of the things that we want to highlight coming out of the Vinicoze series is the fact that there's a movement, an intensified movement towards deeper regional integration at the OECS level. And it would be interesting to know from the young people here to what extent they're aware of their rights to access that free movement, and how do you see that perhaps alleviating some of the burdens of unemployment and some of the other challenges affecting young people?
Yes, as it relates to regional integration, at least from an Anguilla standpoint, I think we find ourselves in a very unique position where we are only associate members of CARICOM. We are only associate members of the OECS. And therefore, we have not signed on to CSME and the single market economy and the free movement of people. We have not signed on to that. On the flip side, as British overseas territories, we were exposed to the European Union and that market. But with the coming of Brexit, we have now find ourselves isolated because we no longer are possibly with Brexit find ourselves cut off from the European Union, and yet we have not quite embraced our regional counterparts through CARICOM and the OECS.
Wow.
And
So
so
that
that creates a huge vacuum for us in a situation that is not quite, which is very unique to Anguilla in that regard.
Yes.
The OECS Commission is very avidly pursuing the concept of integration, their rights of free movement throughout the sub-region. We are aware that there is a lot more that needs to be done because in many instances we encounter difficulties and barriers, even for us traveling throughout the region. And that would depend a lot on the active participation of the member states in that process. I could mention, for instance, in the first steps towards developing the Tibet strategy, a single approach towards the development of technical training so that a candidate who is trained in one territory can very seamlessly find employment in another territory. Part of the training would have to include that possibility. In other words, we need to make the candidates aware of that possibility of transfer.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Ellis, within the OECS, we are dealing with very small populations, small economies. To what extent that is an advantage or a disadvantage in trying to respond to some of the challenges facing us, especially youth unemployment, crime, and all of the other root causes?
Small size, as we know, in the development literature, presents opportunities, but it also presents challenges. And I think it depends on the motivation and the interests of young people in the countries. Because some persons are very nationalistic, they may want to stay in their space. Others see the world as their oyster. Recently, there's been a move within the context of the Caribbean single market and economy, even trending in TVET, where skills have portability, where you can move around. So in case you leave Anguilla, you may not be too far away from your home. But I think you need to create that sense where persons have options, right? If you want to stay here, you have that opportunity to do so. If you want to go elsewhere, you should not be stymied or discouraged from doing that.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hodge, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yes, I'd first like to thank the OECS and the producers of Vinicosi for choosing to come to Anguilla with this series, and also to thank you for too long, the discussion surrounding young people was more about telling us this is what you want us to do and not quite getting from us what is it that you want to do. So I think this is a step in the right direction.
Mr. Romney, I should honor your hospitality, which has been very excellent, and give you the final words.
Let me thank you and OECS for choosing Anguilla and being here and hosting this forum. I also want to say, if I may put back on my Director of Youth hat now, to our young people, I think this is a conversation that we need to continue beyond today and see if we can find more engagements, because I think there's real, and we've seen it on Facebook as well in recent times on different topics. There's a lot of frustration out there concerning perceived barriers in some cases and actual barriers. And I think we will get rid of them through constant engagement, and we should continue the conversation moving forward. I also just want to add one additional thing with regards to regional integration. And this is, again, from Anguilla being a British overseas territory. There are barriers as well to our participation throughout the region. OECS is more inclusive in that regard than CARICOM is. We welcome engagement. I look at it from a policy perspective from my department, but every time we try to engage, we are told we can do that, we can do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. I think within our region, these are barriers that exist for a number of reasons, and it's usually, in this case, it's political, our political status. But if you're truly going to achieve integration, if you're truly going to achieve, get us to a point overseas territories where we want to choose independence and choose integration, you have to engage us in all levels. Yes. And you can't bar us or create these barriers from that engagement.
Thank you for having us, and I have to put on record that the hospitality extended to us was unmatched, and we're very grateful for it.
You're most welcome.
Well, I can speak of my most recent experience, which you're aware of. I opened the Royals in St. Lucia, and what I found while screening, we had over 6,000 applications, of which some were not employable. So it made me question quickly our education system. Some were semi-literate, some just did not have the soft skills, customer service skills, some didn't have the technical skills. Because when you're running you're in a five-star environment, there are certain prerequisites that you need. When I was there, we needed to attract good candidates, and we put an ad out in the newspaper, and we had 6,000 applicants. 70% of them were already in jobs, 30% weren't. And we took, you could say, a gamble of employing about 200 young St. Lucians who didn't have experience in the business. And the plan was, and continued to be, that they'll be trained on the job. So it was a wonderful way for us to address the unemployment of youth. About 98.5% of the workforce there are St. Lucians. So something I'm very proud of. We only had about 8 work permits of 950 people. So obviously there's a lot of training that had to happen prior and continues to happen to get everyone up to a five-star level. You know, there need to be more dialogue between private sector and government, because we're not able, it seems, not only here in St. Lucia, but other parts of the Caribbean, we're not able to have our kids ready for the workforce. Tourism for me will always be, and probably will always be, the #1, because we're fortunate to be located in this part of the world where you have great weather year-round, wonderful beaches. The culture is, for me, second to none. The food that we have, music, so many attributes that helps to put on a great experience. Yes, so it will be here forever, but like everything else, I don't think you should put all your eggs in one basket. We have to dare to be different. And there are many opportunities that I see in others. There are opportunities with food. We can become exporters of food. There is fashion. You know, someone said to me yesterday, we should be the biggest manufacturer of swimsuits. Why aren't we? And we have great ideas, but to get back to entrepreneurship, someone would have to listen and be a part of these business plans and trust and be willing to take risks to help us along that journey. And so, again, this is partnership between private sector and government, because as much as we speak about entrepreneurship, the markets would have to be open to us, and we would have to judge the competitiveness. But then there is sports as well. We have produced cricketers, footballers, track and field. That can become an industry, because when our star athletes, they go there, they make a lot of money, they'll come back home and invest. Mentorship, for me, it would be key. We have very successful people, not only here in St. Lucia, but in Barbados and Trinidad and Grenada. So I would say let all of us spend a little bit more time, go into community centers and inspire them and teach them the skills that we can, and influence your circle the best way you can to make the Caribbean and St. Lucia a better place.
Come talk, come chat, come listen. Let's talk integration, one OECS region. Antigua, Vinicoze, Anguilla, Vinicoze, Vivia, Dominica, Vinicoze, hey, Grenada, Vinicoze, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Montserrat, Martinique, Vinicoze. The OECS Public Education Forum Series, Vinicoze. Come chat to us, come talk to us, we're listening. Vinicoze is brought to you by the OECS 10th EDF Economic Integration and Trade of the OECS Region Project. Vinicoze.